Welcome back to the True Detectives podcast, everyone. Ready for another crazy investigation?
I am.
We're always trying to separate fact from mystery.
Absolutely.
And today we're going to dive into a seriously mind-bending case file called the Ouroboros File.
The Ouroboros File. Huh?
Yeah, so imagine this. A detective stumbles upon a case file, and it's like no other they've ever seen.
Okay.
The evidence in it points to crimes that, get this, haven't even happened yet.
Wow.
It's like they're not chasing a past offender, but a future one. It's pretty wild.
That's a whole new level of detective work.
Right. And one account even refers to this whole thing as the twisted timeline investigation.
Twisted timeline.
Yeah. It really throws everything you thought you knew about detective work right out the window, you know?
I can imagine. So where do we even begin with something like this? What are the sources we're looking at?
Well, we've got excerpts from various reports, witness testimonies, and even some notes from the detective herself.
Sounds like we've got quite the puzzle to piece together.
Exactly. And that's what we're here to do. We're going to unpack this whole Ouroboros file thing and see if we can learn anything about this crazy paradox.
It's going to be a wild ride, that's for sure. I'm buckled up and ready.
Me too. Let's get started. So it all starts with this detective. Her name's Elena Torres.
Torres, okay.
And she finds this strange file, not your typical case file with, suspects and victims and all that.
What's in it then?
This one's got a future date 3 days ahead, to be precise.
A future date? That's unusual.
Yeah. Plus a cryptic address. Some old warehouse.
Creepy old warehouse.
Totally. But here's the really creepy part. There's a message. Will occur 10 p.m. Prevent if you can.
Wow. So someone is sending her a warning about a future crime.
That's what it seems like, right? But who would do that and why?
It's certainly a puzzle. What did Detective Torres do with this information?
Well, you got to think, right? She's a detective. She's driven by duty. Plus, I'm sure she's a little curious, right?
I would be.
So what does she do? She goes to the address.
Of course. The old warehouse.
Yep. 3 days later, the night of the future crime.
So she's staking it out.
You got it. Waiting. What a weird assignment, right?
Right.
I mean, what do you even look for?
That's a good question. You're not observing a known suspect. You're essentially waiting for time itself to become the suspect.
Exactly. It's 10 p.m., and bam, she sees something. A flash of movement in a window. A figure. A glint of metal. Then a muffled scream.
Oh, wow. That must have been a rush of adrenaline.
I can only imagine. So Torres, she bursts into the warehouse, gun drawn. Ready for anything, right?
Of course, a scream and a metallic glint. That's a classic sign of trouble. So, did she find a crime in progress?
That's the thing. Not exactly. She finds overturned tables, tools scattered everywhere.
Yeah.
And right in the middle of it all, a chalk outline of a circle.
A circle.
Yeah, and inside the circle, intricate symbols, like some kind of astronomical chart or something.
That's even weirder. But no victim? No suspect?
Nope, nothing. Just that strange circle. It's like a crime scene, but without a crime.
It's like walking into the aftermath of something that never actually happened.
That's a great way to put it. So, of course, they do the whole forensics thing, right? They analyze those symbols.
What did they find?
Nothing. Dead end. The scientists, they're stumped. The astronomers are like, nope, never seen those symbols before. And the occult shop down the street, they're intrigued, but they can't make heads or tails of it either.
So this warehouse incident just becomes a big joke at the precinct, right?
You know it. A mystery that everyone kind of laughs off because it's just too weird.
Typical, right? The unexplainable just becomes something to chuckle about. But I bet Detective Torres wasn't laughing.
No, she wasn't. The whole thing, it really gets to her. She can't sleep. She keeps thinking about those symbols. And then it hits her. What if they're not astronomical at all?
What do you mean?
What if there's something else entirely? What if they're like a code or a blueprint or something?
That's a good instinct. Sometimes you got to look outside the usual boxes to find the answer.
And that's exactly what she does. Torres, she spends nights poring over those symbols. And she cracks it. They are a blueprint.
A blueprint for what?
Coordinates. For an abandoned observatory.
An observatory.
Yep. And get this, the timing. Whatever's supposed to happen there, it hasn't happened yet. This wasn't the scene of the future crime. It's the location of a future event.
Wow. So now she's not just trying to solve a past crime. She's racing against time to prevent a future one.
Exactly. So Torres rushes to the observatory, and there he is, a figure on top of this massive planetarium projector holding this thing. It's humming, crackling with energy. The reports describe it as something unlike anything anyone's ever seen.
Almost like something out of science fiction.
Totally. And then he speaks. He calls himself the Ouroboros.
The Ouroboros.
Yeah, like the snake eating its own tail, The symbol of infinity, the beginning and the end. It's a name that screams time.
It definitely suggests a manipulation of time or a cyclical view of it. So what about this weapon he's holding?
He calls it an unwriting machine. And its purpose, to erase an unwanted future.
Erase an unwanted future. How?
He shows her. It projects this image of the city skyline, their city, and then it just starts to disappear. Buildings vanish into thin air. He's not just preventing one crime. He's wiping out a whole chunk of their reality.
That's terrifying, but also raises a really big question. Who decides what's an unwanted future?
Right. What gives him the right to just erase a part of their world?
And what about all the people, the lives, that would be affected by that erasure?
Well, that's where his motive comes in. He believes this terrible future, the one he's trying to erase, it all stems from some past wrong. He thinks, somehow, by wiping out the future, he's fixing the past.
It's a warped sense of justice. Erasing the future doesn't fix the past. It just creates a new, potentially worse present.
I agree. So there they are. Torres with her gun, the Ouroboros with his unwriting machine. He's about to activate it.
It's a classic standoff, but in this case, it's not just about stopping a criminal, it's about preserving the timeline.
Exactly. But then something incredible happens.
What? What happened?
As he's about to activate the machine, there's this ripple in the projection, a tiny change in the disappearing skyline.
A riddle. What caused that?
Torres. It was her act of defiance, even firing her gun. It somehow disrupted his plan.
So even facing this seemingly unstoppable force, her actions had an impact. That's hopeful in a way.
It is. And the Ouroboros, he sees it too, this little change in his perfectly planned erasure, and he freaks out.
I bet he did.
The machine starts to overload. It's like it can't handle this deviation from his script. And in all the chaos, Torres tackles him.
And then?
The projector explodes. And when the dust settles, the Ouroboros is gone. Vanished.
Gone.
Just like that.
Yeah.
And outside, the city's still there, completely untouched, like nothing happened.
It's like the whole event was almost absorbed back into the fabric of time.
That's one way to put it.
Okay.
But it's not over yet. Get this. The next day, the file, it disappears from Torres' desk.
The Ouroboros file just vanishes.
Yep. Gone. And she gets called in by her captain. He reprimands her, but it's vague. And she gets this look from him, like he knows more than he's saying.
Like he knows something happened, something beyond the official report. That's intriguing. Almost like there's a higher level of awareness about these sorts of things.
Exactly. But he doesn't say anything more. And Torres, she's left to deal with this experience on her own. It changes her, though. She sees this city differently. It's not so solid anymore. More like it's built on these shifting timelines.
That's a profound realization. To go from perceiving reality as fixed to understanding its potential fluidity must be both fascinating and unsettling.
Totally. It makes you realize the enemy isn't always some guy with a gun. It could be something far weirder, something messing with time itself,
Absolutely. It makes you reconsider the nature of reality itself. Is what we experience just one of many possible timelines? And what forces might be at play in shaping those timelines?
Big questions, right? So that's the Ouroboros file. What do you make of it? Future crimes? A time-bending machine? A detective caught in a temporal war? It's a lot to process.
It really is. And it leaves us with so many questions. What exactly constitutes an unwanted future? Who gets to decide? And what are the consequences of trying to control time itself?
It makes you wonder, right? What if our choices, every little action, every decision, could be shaping not just our own future, but countless other potential futures as well?
It's a mind-boggling thought, and it's one that the Ouroboros file, despite being a fictional case, really forces us to confront.
It certainly does. And that's what we're all about here on the Two Detectives podcast, exploring the strange, the unbelievable, and the mysteries that make us question everything we think we know. So if you enjoyed this deep dive into the Ouroboros file, be sure to rate and follow this show. We've got plenty more investigations where that came from. We'll see you next time, detectives.
Until then, keep those minds open and those timelines straight.